The night was cold and heavy with rain, the kind that made every street lamp blur into a soft halo of light. Margaret had just finished her nightly routine. She had slipped into bed, set her reading glasses on the nightstand, and allowed herself the comfort of silence, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the window. Her house, usually filled with chatter when her daughter visited, felt unusually quiet. She had grown used to the calm, though sometimes it made her feel the weight of loneliness. As she was about to drift into sleep, a sound startled her: a knock at the front door. It wasn't loud, but at that hour any sound felt out of place. She froze for a moment, unsure if she had imagined it. Then it came again, firmer this time. She pulled her robe around her shoulders and walked down the hallway, her slippers brushing against the hardwood floor. The clock on the wall showed it was past 11. Who could possibly be here at this time? She opened the door, and there he was, Daniel, her son-in-law. His hair was damp from the rain, his coat darkened with water, and his expression held something Margaret couldn't quite read. He looked like a man carrying too much, and for a moment he simply stood there, saying nothing, just breathing in the cool night air as if gathering the courage to speak. "Daniel." Margaret's voice broke the silence. "What on earth are you doing here so late?" He gave a weak smile, but his eyes betrayed him. "I'm sorry, Margaret. I didn't know where else to go. I needed to talk." Margaret stepped aside without hesitation. She could see it in his face. This wasn't a casual visit. Something had brought him here, something that weighed heavily on him. As he entered, she caught the scent of rain clinging to his coat. He looked out of place in her cozy living room, his tall frame hunched as though the world had been pressing down on him. She gestured for him to sit, though he hesitated before lowering himself onto the couch. He ran a hand over his face, leaving his wedding ring glinting under the lamplight. Margaret sat across from him, pulling her robe tighter. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. "You should be home with Emily," she said gently, her voice calm but curious. "Is everything all right?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. He stared at the floor, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "That's just it. Things at home. They haven't been all right. Not for a while." Margaret felt her chest tighten. Emily hadn't said much about her marriage lately, only small hints about being busy or stressed. But mothers notice things, even in silence. She leaned forward slightly, her heart racing, but she kept her voice steady. "What happened?" Daniel exhaled deeply, as if releasing weeks of tension. "It's nothing dramatic. No shouting, no betrayal. Just distance. We talk, but it's like we're speaking two different languages. I love her, I really do. But lately it feels like love isn't enough." The words hung in the air. Margaret could hear the rain tapping harder against the windows, as though echoing the storm inside him. She had always thought of Daniel as strong, dependable, the kind of man who carried burdens quietly. To see him unravel, even slightly, stirred something in her, a mix of concern and empathy. He leaned back on the couch, his eyes closing briefly. "I don't know why I came here. Maybe because you're the only person I feel I can talk to right now." Margaret's mind raced. She had always respected Daniel, even admired the way he had cared for Emily. But tonight, he looked different, less like the confident man she knew, and more like someone lost in a maze of his own heart. She considered her words carefully. "You did the right thing coming here. Sometimes we need to let things out before they break us. Emily loves you. I know she does. Whatever this is, it doesn't have to be the end." Daniel nodded, but the shadow in his eyes didn't lift. His voice softened, almost a whisper. "I want to believe that. I don't want to lose her." Margaret reached for the blanket draped over the chair and handed it to him. "You're shivering. Warm yourself up. We'll figure this out." Her words were steady, but inside she felt a strange unease. She couldn't shake the thought that this visit, this late-night confession, was only the beginning of something deeper. The rain outside grew louder, drumming steadily against the roof. Daniel wrapped the blanket around his shoulders, his eyes finally meeting hers. There was gratitude there, but also something else, a vulnerability she had never seen before. Margaret held his gaze for a moment. then looked away, suddenly aware of how close the moment felt. She stood and busied herself by pouring tea, needing something to do with her hands. As she set the steaming cups on the table, she told herself it was just tea, just conversation. But she couldn't deny the tension that lingered in the room when she finally sat down again. She noticed Daniel watching her, as though searching for something guidance, comfort, maybe even understanding. She gave him a small, reassuring smile. Though her own heart was unsettled, Daniel sat on the couch, shoulders bent forward, his hands rubbing nervously together. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence between them. Margaret sat across from him, her tea untouched, waiting. She could see the way he avoided her eyes, how his chest rose and fell like he was carrying a weight too heavy for him. Finally, he spoke. "I don't even know where to start." His voice was low, almost broken. "Everything feels wrong at home. Emily and I. We used to laugh together. We used to talk about everything. Now it feels like we're strangers living under the same roof." Margaret's heart tightened. She thought of her daughter, how she used to smile so easily when she mentioned Daniel. Lately, Emily had been quieter, brushing off questions, saying she was busy. Margaret had felt something was off. But hearing it from Daniel was different. It made the problem real. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his face in his hands. "I love her, Margaret. I love your daughter more than anything. But I can't seem to reach her anymore. I try to talk and it turns into small arguments. I try to give her space and it just feels like we drift further apart." Margaret listened, her heart heavy. She wanted to comfort him, to tell him marriages went through difficult times. That distance didn't always mean the end. But she also knew that his pain was raw, and the last thing he needed was hollow reassurance. She spoke softly. "Daniel, every couple goes through seasons. Some are warm and full of joy. Others, colder, harder to bear. What matters is what you do with those seasons. Emily still loves you. I see it, even if you don't right now." Daniel looked up, his eyes tired. "I want to believe that. But sometimes I wonder if I'm enough for her anymore. She deserves someone who makes her happy every single day, and I feel like I've failed at that." Margaret leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. She had lived through a long marriage herself, full of both laughter and disappointment. And she knew what he was saying wasn't unusual. Yet the way he said it with such deep conviction pulled at her. "You haven't failed," she told him firmly. "You're here because you care enough to fight for her. That already means more than you know." Daniel nodded, but his eyes glistened with tears he was trying hard to hide. The rain outside grew steadier, as if echoing the emotions inside the room. And then, after a long pause, he spoke words Margaret wasn't expecting. His voice dropped lower, as if admitting something he had held back for far too long. "There's something else I need to tell you." Margaret felt her breath catch. The tone of his voice changed, heavier, almost dangerous in its honesty. She braced herself, unsure what was coming. Daniel's gaze lifted, meeting hers directly for the first time since he arrived. His eyes were steady, yet filled with conflict. "I've been holding something inside. Something I don't know if I should say. But it's been eating at me." Margaret's pulse quickened. "Go on," she said quietly. He swallowed hard. "You've always been kind to me. From the very beginning, you treated me like family, even before Emily and I were married. You listened when I felt unheard. You understood when no one else did. And lately, when things have been hard at home, I catch myself thinking about you more than I should." The room seemed to still. Margaret felt her entire body tense, her heart thudding against her ribs. His words weren't loud, but the weight of them filled every corner of the house. Daniel's face flushed with shame, but he didn't look away. "I know it's wrong to feel this. You're my mother-in-law. I love Emily, and I don't want to hurt her. But I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I needed to tell someone, and the only person I trust with this is you." Margaret's hands tightened around her robe. She hadn't expected this. She had thought he might confess about work, about stress, even about regrets in his marriage. But not this. Not feelings directed at her. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unsure of what to say. A storm of emotions swept through her: shock, confusion, even a strange sense of tenderness. She had never looked at Daniel in that way, yet his honesty pierced through her. Finally, she managed to speak. "Daniel, you're saying this because you're hurting. When people feel lost, they sometimes cling to the nearest light. I understand what you're going through, but you must be careful. These feelings can confuse you. They can make you believe something that isn't truly there." Daniel's eyes dropped, shame flooding his face. I know it sounds terrible. I needed to be honest. I couldn't keep carrying it alone." Margaret's heart softened. She reached out and placed her hand lightly on his arm. "You came here because—" The clock ticked softly in the background, but Margaret barely heard it. Daniel's confession echoed in her mind like a voice she couldn't silence. He sat across from her, shoulders slumped, his eyes shadowed with shame. She had expected tears about Emily, maybe regret about choices, but not this, never. This. His words had carved a line between them that hadn't existed before. She took a slow breath, trying to steady her voice. "Daniel, you need to rest. You're exhausted, and when we're exhausted, feelings get mixed up. You've been carrying too much." But Daniel shook his head. His voice, though quiet, carried a desperate edge. "Margaret, I've thought about this for a long time. It isn't just because I'm tired or hurting. I know what I feel. You've been my safe place, the one person who listens without judgment. When things got bad at home, it wasn't just comfort I wanted, it was you." The words landed heavy, leaving no room to pretend he hadn't meant them. Margaret's hands gripped the edge of her robe. Her heart pounded, but she kept her composure. She knew what she was hearing was born out of loneliness, confusion, and longing for connection, not betrayal. Still, it was dangerous territory. "Daniel," she said softly, "you're mixing gratitude with something else. I've been kind to you because you're family, because you're my daughter's husband. Don't mistake that for more than it is." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes desperate. "I know the difference, Margaret. Believe me, I've fought with myself over this. I love Emily. I want my marriage to work. But when I'm with you, I feel seen. I feel understood in a way I don't even recognize anymore with her. It's not about replacing Emily, it's about needing to say the truth, even if it hurts." Margaret swallowed hard, her throat dry. His honesty was raw, unfiltered, but it wasn't cruel. It came from a place of pain, a place she recognized. She had lived long enough to know that people sometimes confessed not because they wanted to act, but because the burden of silence had become unbearable. Her chest ached, but she steadied her voice. "What you're feeling is real to you, Daniel, but it doesn't mean it belongs here, between us. You came here because you're lost, not because you want something from me. That line, we cannot cross it." For a moment, Daniel lowered his gaze, his jaw tight. He rubbed the back of his neck as though trying to shake off the weight of his own words. The silence stretched until Margaret almost believed he might stand up and leave. Instead, he whispered, "I didn't want you to think less of me. I couldn't hold it anymore. I needed you to know." Margaret's expression softened. She reached out, placing a steady hand on his arm. "I don't think less of you. I think you're human, and humans get confused, especially when they're hurting. But you can't let these feelings guide you. You have to fight for Emily. You owe her that." Daniel's eyes glistened. He turned his face away quickly, but not before Margaret saw the tears. "Sometimes I feel like she doesn't even want me around anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "Like I'm just in the way of her life. And when I'm here with you, I don't feel that way." Margaret's heart cracked at his words. She had been married long enough to know that neglect, even unintentional, could wound a person deeply. She thought of Emily, her busy schedule, her restless energy, and realized Daniel's feelings weren't baseless. But they weren't permission either. "You matter to her," Margaret said firmly. "She chose you, Daniel. And if you still believe in that choice, then don't let these thoughts of me distract you from what you already have. You're stronger than this moment." Daniel drew in a shaky breath. "And if I'm not? What if I keep feeling this way? Margaret met his eyes steadily. Then you fight harder for what's right. Love isn't about chasing every feeling. It's about holding on to the commitment you made, even when it feels impossible. Her words seemed to settle into him, though he still looked torn. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time since he'd arrived, he seemed smaller, like a man drained of everything he had left. Margaret rose from her chair, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. The rain had slowed, drops glistening on the glass. She spoke without turning around. Daniel, I know you're lonely. I know you're tired, but you have to be careful. Some truths are better left unspoken because once they're out, they can never be taken back. What you said tonight, whether you meant it or not, changes things. For you, for me, for Emily. She turned back to him, her eyes gentle but firm. We can't go down that road. You understand? Daniel nodded slowly, his face pale but resigned. I understand. I needed you to know, even if it was only once. Margaret walked back and placed her hand on his shoulder. You've said it. Now let it go. Focus on Emily. She's your wife, your partner, your home. Whatever you feel about me, it stops here. Daniel closed his eyes, and a tear rolled down his cheek before he quickly brushed it away. I'm sorry, Margaret. I didn't mean to put this on you. I just couldn't keep it inside anymore. She gave his shoulder a light squeeze. We'll both pretend this conversation never left this room. It will stay between us, but it can't live between us. Do you hear me? Yes, he whispered, his voice shaking. The clock ticked again, louder this time, or maybe it only felt louder because of the silence that followed. Margaret sat back down, her heart heavy. She knew he had spoken from pain, not malice. But she also knew nothing between them would ever be the same again. The air felt fragile, as though one wrong word might shatter the uneasy peace. Daniel leaned back against the couch, closing his eyes, his breathing uneven. Margaret watched him, torn between compassion and the uneasy knowledge that the line between them had been blurred, even if only for a moment. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, and Margaret thought about what tomorrow would bring. She knew Emily deserved the truth of Daniel's heart, yet she also knew telling her would destroy more than it saved. She carried that choice silently, realizing that sometimes the hardest part of love wasn't speaking, it was knowing when to stay quiet. As the night stretched on, Margaret felt the truth of Daniel's words settle inside her like a stone. He had admitted something that could never be taken back. And though she had set the boundary firmly, the unspoken truth lingered, fragile and dangerous. Hidden beneath the surface of everything they both still had, the night felt endless. Margaret sat quietly, her thoughts racing faster than the rain outside. Daniel remained on the couch, his hands pressed together, his head lowered. The weight of what he had confessed still lingered between them, thick and heavy, like smoke in the air. Margaret wanted to believe that silence would wash it away, but she knew better. Words once spoken stayed forever. At last, Daniel broke the silence. His voice was fragile, stripped of the strength he usually carried. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have said any of that. I've only made things worse. Margaret leaned forward, her tone gentle but steady. Daniel, what you did was speak the truth of your feelings. That doesn't make you weak. And it doesn't make you a bad man. It makes you human. But now you have a choice. You can let those feelings ruin what you've built with Emily, or you can use tonight as the moment you fight harder for her. Daniel lifted his eyes, red and tired. And if I've already broken it by saying this to you? You haven't, she replied firmly. You came here because you wanted guidance, not because you wanted to cross a line. Remember that? You're not beyond repair. Neither is your marriage. Her words settled into him, and slowly he nodded. His chest rose and fell in a heavy sigh, as though some of the weight had loosened its grip. But the sadness in his eyes told her the road ahead would not be easy. Margaret stood and moved toward the kitchen. She poured fresh tea, needing something to break the tension. When she returned, she handed him a cup, and for a moment they simply sat together, sipping in silence. The steam rose between them like a quiet reminder of warmth, of comfort, of something steady. Finally, Margaret spoke again. Daniel, listen to me. Tonight doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do tomorrow. Emily doesn't know what you've told me, and she doesn't have to. This stays here. But if you truly love her, then you go home and you show her that love in every way you can. You don't give up on her. Daniel's voice broke. What if she doesn't want to try anymore? Then you remind her why she chose you in the first place, Margaret said quickly. You don't wait for her to come to you. You go to her. Love isn't about waiting for perfect moments. It's about choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard. Her words seemed to strike something inside him. He straightened his back, wiped his face, and looked at her with a steadiness he hadn't had all night. You're right. I've been drowning in fear instead of fighting. I've been so afraid of losing her that I forgot to hold on. Margaret nodded, relief softening her chest. She could see the man Emily had fallen in love with flicker back to life in that moment. Man ready to stand, to fight, to believe again. The clock struck midnight, and the house seemed to exhale. Daniel placed the empty cup on the table and rose to his feet. His voice was stronger now. Thank you, Margaret, for listening, for not turning me away, for reminding me of who I need to be. Margaret stood as well, her heart still heavy but hopeful. She touched his arm lightly, the gesture both farewell and reassurance. You don't need to thank me. Just go home and love my daughter the way she deserves. That's all the thanks I'll ever want. Daniel.